Hi, I'm Olive Von Topp, burlesque performer and empowerment coach, and I want to talk to you about why perfectionism might be ruining your life. So that's maybe a little harsh, but I think that often we think of perfectionism as a good thing. And sure, like perfectionists often get things done, we're like quote unquote successful, we're busy, we're hardworking. But there can be a lot of negative things that come out of perfectionism as well. One of the main ones is stress. If you are constantly working for your worth, if you think that your worth is tied up in your productivity or your accolades or accomplishments or performance, then like you are always hustling. And if you believe that you're only worthy if you're perfect and perfect doesn't exist, then you're never going to reach that. You're always going to be hustling, and that's pretty stressful. Having really poor boundaries can also be stressful. So perhaps if you have people pleasing behaviors, you're afraid of disappointing people, which can also come from perfectionism. You might say yes to things that you don't want to do, or you might take on things because you think that other people aren't going to do it as well as you can. So that in itself can be stressful. Another way that, perfectionism can be negative is that it leads to a lack of joy, or it doesn't allow for joy. So again, if we're always hustling and working and trying to like better ourselves to try to be enough, there's like no sense of joy when we get to those accomplishments, because we make those goals and standards because we think that when we get there, when we do the impossible thing, when we're all the things, then we'll be enough, then we'll be worthy, then we'll be lovable. And then we get there and we're like, I feel the same way. Like nothing has changed except that I've now reached this goal, which actually can feel really terrible and really joyless, because like the carrot that you were dangling in front of yourself, is no longer there. And in that, we don't also get to enjoy the process of who we become and what we learn. It's all about the achievement and the accomplishment, and like part of the whole purpose is, making growing as people, right? And so we don't really allow ourselves to feel joy. We often don't allow ourselves things like rest and pleasure. um, and there's really just not a lot of joy in berating ourselves all the time, if that's something you do as well. If you're really hard on yourself or you're constantly punishing yourself because of mistakes, that can feel pretty joyless. What else did I want to say? You can miss out on a lot of things as a perfectionist. One, because you might be like too busy doing the things that you think are going to prove your worth. Like, if you're really hardworking at your job and you're staying really late hours at the office, or, on your business, or trying to make your house look perfect, whatever it is, you can really miss out on a lot of things. But similarly, if you're afraid to take risks that because you are going to look foolish or flawed, if that's your idea, that's often for perfectionists. They don't want to take they don't want to take chances. They do what they're good at. They do what they know they're good at because they don't want to risk feeling silly, and they don't want to risk failure, because failure means something inherently wrong with me. Not just like, hey, I tried something new and it didn't go well, or it didn't go as I expected. How can I learn from this? Perfectionists make it mean something about them. So, therefore, it can be really hard to take risks. And risks are where all kinds of exciting things happen in our lives. And I'm not talking about like, like carelessly gambling away all your money, or like jumping out of planes, if that's not your thing. I'm just talking about like risks to try things that you're not necessarily good at, that you've never done before, that you don't know how to do, that you fumble with. And that can be something as simple as like joining like a softball team or something, if that's something you're interested in, or like showing up in front of your audience, like whatever those things are. If you're afraid to take risks, then you're likely going to miss out on stuff. Another way that perfectionism can show up in our lives in a negative way is procrastination, which sounds counterintuitive, but for a lot of perfectionists, procrastination is a outcome of perfectionism, because if you don't know how to do something perfectly and you're talking yourself out of it all the time and you don't know how to do it, you don't know where to start, you don't do it. Or you put it off until there's no choice. And I'm sure you've had that experience where you leave something until the last minute because you try and then it just isn't ever good enough, and then you have no choice but to like do the thing good enough and it turns out fine or even great perhaps. And sometimes perfectionists will even not do the thing at all. So like I have clients who didn't think of themselves as perfectionists, which is really irrelevant, but like just helping to understand our behaviors, but who have a really hard time doing anything because they don't want to do it imperfectly. So their lives don't look perfect. Their lives look kind of chaotic to outside people, but for them, that feeling, that dealing with the feeling of not doing something and the disappointment you have with yourself, whatever, is easier for those folks than dealing with the disappointment of trying and not succeeding. So people just don't try. And then another way, fifth way and final way for today that perfectionism can ruin your life or just show up negatively is in your relationships. Obviously, if you're, again, working all the time, have poor boundaries, you're always trying to like be perfect, it takes a lot of time potentially away from people that you love and spending time with the people that you love. Your relationships can certainly take a toll. Also, perfectionists can have really high standards of themselves and of other people, can be really critical of themselves and other people too. So that can show up in all kinds of ways in our relationships, as you can imagine. So if you want to learn more about ways that perfectionism could be ruining your life, you can check out my blog, olivevontopp.com/blog. But also I am running a 8-week self-love course called F Perfect, Stop Being So Hard on Yourself. It's for women who are, super hard on themselves, beat themselves up for everything, are afraid to make mistakes, have difficulty, potentially have difficulty achieving their goals, are just really tired of like feeling like they're never good enough no matter what they do, and just want to learn some concrete strategies to start like managing your mind, to stop being such a dick to yourself. We also do things like working in our bodies and being present in our bodies and trying to learn how to start to reestablish a trust there around like our cues in terms of accessing our needs and desires, and as well as boundaries. And we do boundary work around setting and maintaining boundaries, as well as a lot of work around self-compassion. Generally speaking, I think people just feel like they experience a lot more ease, like quieting of that like critical negative, gremlin in your brain, as well as joy in their life. Like things are more joyous and more pleasurable. Like they allow themselves to experience more pleasure, which to me is kind of the whole point. So if you're interested in that, it starts September 29th. You can check that out also on my website, olivevontopp.com, and there's like an F Perfect link at the top. So hopefully I'll see you there.